Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk podcast. On the podcast, we talk about spirituality, healing, self-development, and any other topics of interest which support the path of self-development and personal evolution. So today on the video podcast, what we're going to do is I'm going to be referring back to an old blog because, so if you catch me looking over here, that's what I'm doing. So the purpose of today's episode is to discuss ways in which you can have a reflective practice and build one, and also how to observe the differences and the changes when you are going through personal evolution, personal awakening, and really integrate that into your experience to observe the shifts and changes that occur. So before we get started, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It helps what I'm doing to grow, to reach more people, and it just supports the effort, the time that I put in to deliver the support to you. And if you haven't already noticed, I do have a wet patch on my jumper because I spilled something down it. So, if you don't know me, I'm Natalie, and I've been on my journey for, Jesus Christ, years now. Seems like a million lifetimes, and if you two are on the journey, then you may know what I'm referring to. So on my journey, on my path, I have gone through a lot of transmutation and shifts and changes, and throughout that experience of being on the path, I've learned so many things myself and discovered ways to work with my own energy and to notice the subtle shifts and changes that are happening around me and how that affects my internal experience and vice versa. So a lot of what I talk about is from personal experience because I can only speak from my personal experience, especially when referring to shifts and changes and noticing them outside of myself. So you may find that some of these things support you on your own path and offer an opportunity for you to try something new or to develop something that you already do. And you know what? There's one thing that I say to people all the time, that every single one of us is having an individual experience. And we're having an individual experience looking at life through our own lens, through our own experiences and our own ways of processing information. And all of these things, the combination of our life experience and what has brought us to this place, operating in this body with this way of looking at the world, is all going to impact the way in which the things that we're more inclined to do, the things that we're more inclined to be attuned to, and the ways of just seeing the universe at large. So for a little backstory, just very, very brief, so you kind of understand a general stance of where I'm coming from. Before my awakening, I was atheist. So wasn't particularly drawn to anything in my experience, it just pottered along life. Now, that did change, and I do believe in a life force energy. Call it God, universe, spirit, matter, whatever you want to call it. I personally believe there's something out there. So the ways in which I'm approaching this is through that lens. And as you know, because I put on here a fair bit, I work with astrology, something that I'm actively trying to really get a grasp of, because you know what, it's a good job it happened like this, because I remember years ago when I started and I was just like, yeah, you know what, this is interesting, I'm gonna go, I'm interested in this, why not? And then it's just snowballed, and then the deeper you go, the deeper it goes, and then you just kind of dig in, and it just keeps going in terms of information, and just the topic itself is so vast and it's like a minefield. So I am currently in the process of really grasping some of the things that I'm learning, especially history. History has never been my strong point. But anyway, I'm just going to end up yabbing for ages. So I'm going to get started with as I was saying, referring back to my experience and the way in which I look at the world to kind of give you an indication of where I'm coming from, because it may not necessarily fit with your experience. As I said, we all look through life through our own individual lens, and I believe that there's a reason for that. So take what you will, take what resonates with you, and if it doesn't, then that's fine. You can develop on your own experience as you are. So when I'm experiencing, kind of going back to a point of how I experience the shifts and changes, is noticing first and foremost what comes up in the mind. Things that I'm naturally inclined to do, such as songs that I'm listening to, clothes that I wear, ways in which I express myself and my energy, how it comes across in my voice, and how it just impacts the internal experience and then comes out into the external experience, and how it's activated from inside. So I'm trying to think of a simpler way to probably explain this if you didn't quite fully understand the ways in which I'm approaching this, is that notice things that are happening internally and notice the action that you take as a result of those internal shifts that are occurring. Now, the only way to observe, in my experience, internal shifts is by observing the internal notions of self, which widely includes thought and ways in which you're thinking and small ways in which your thinking changes as a result of making the small shifts. Because so often when I'm talking about astrology, or even when I'm just talking about healing or self-development, conversations that I have over and over again about these topics is that you have to go and walk in alignment with what has been presented to you. And what has been presented to you could come in the form of something that is happening internally, or something that is coming externally, which serves as a prompt for you to adjust something internally and continue on the path of self-development. So, as I said, first and foremost, monitoring the experience that you're having. And when you're going through an awakening, even if it's for a prolonged period of time, and this is part of the reflective practice, which I personally use, is noticing small shifts and changes that are happening and working with those shifts and changes, i.e. making them, and how that affects the adjustment of your psyche and the adjustment of the ways in which you approach matters in the world. So I'm laughing because I do this all the time. The way that I explain things, and I'm trying to simplify the way that I explain things. So anyway, we're going to move on to the useful practices, which is written in the blog. So I'm going to, as I say every time, try and keep this short and sweet. But this is in the why you should have a reflective practice. And the date of this blog, if you want to go check it out, which there's going to be a link in the bio. And this is on the 17th of January 2024. So, and actually, before I get on to the bullet points, I want to just mention this part that I've written in the blog, that it can be all too easy to overlook changes when they are happening within us. You may feel as though you've only walked over hills, when in truth you have been moving mountains. Regularly reflecting on your path can support the solidifying of the changes that you are making and the realizations of the impact they're having on your life. And this is an important point to note when you are observing shifts and changes that are happening internally and working with the currents of nature and the currents of your own evolution. Because I found several times, and as I say, I've done a lot of transmutation in the last 3 years, but there have been several times where I just kind of do it. I just do it. So having a reflective practice has been such an important thing to ensure that there is a pinpoint, even if it's such a minuscule moment in the day, to reflect on how I approach a situation differently as I would have done previously. And this is where I talk about the reflective practice, but also realizing the impact of the small shifts that you make and how they compound and how they bring about drastic results and drastic changes. Now, a book that I've read, which there's two books, The Compound Effect, and I don't know if it's, oh, there we go, The Compound Effect, and it's Darren Hardy, and no, the other one's not there, but you've probably heard of this one. It's called Atomic Habits, and I can't remember who it's by. Personally, I prefer The Compound Effect because it's short and it's sweet and it gets to the point. Probably take some notes from it. But yeah, you can read those books and it will give you some information and some methods for you to work with the compound effect in your life. So they're practical steps that you can take. And as I said, using a combination of those, the things that are in those two books and the spiritual essence of it, and observing emotions, ways of thinking, ways of being, ways of doing, observing them come up and then making changes to the things that don't necessarily resonate or aren't necessarily yielding the types of results that you want. And as I said, the process being one that is gradual, one that isn't just a flip of a switch, because we see this all the time. And in all honesty, there have been times where I've spoken about it, probably not necessarily as clearly as I perhaps could have, but this is in relation to quantum leaping and quantum jumping. And let's say, for example, you are where you are now, you identify where you want to be, and then you begin to embody all of the things that this person, this part of you, this version of you who is living this reality, this life, all of the qualities that they embody to create the life that it is you are looking at. I don't think I explained that very well. So there's you here, there's the ideal version of you. This ideal version of you of all of these qualities, you begin to embody them, and in the process there's that quantum leap because you become that version of yourself. Now, with that, what perhaps I haven't been clear on in the past is that depending on who you are as an individual, depends on how easy or how I say easy, it's probably not the best word, but I'm going to use easy because it's the only one I can think of right now, but how easy it is for you to make the changes from A to B. Now, in that process, as I said, for me personally, I can only speak of it as how it's been, which has been a steady, gradual effect of the compounding changes that are made on a small cellular level, on a small shifting level. So if something comes up in my experience, I notice it that comes up, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel so great, or this isn't conducive to where I want to go, who I want to be. Let me make a minor adjustment. And then if you can make those minor adjustments just throughout your daily life, then imagine how they can compact over a period of time, which in my experience works very, very well. So going back to what I was mentioning here is regularly reflecting is really important, because when you're making these small changes, you're making them. Those small changes are just happening as part of your personal experience. So you may not necessarily get to a point where it's like, oh, you might not get to a point where it's like, oh yeah, I've made this humongous shift in my life, because it hasn't been a drastic from A to B. It's been a gradual movement from A to B. So if that is the case, and you don't do huge quantum leaps, such as going from A to B, but you do the gradual one, then having a space where you can reflect on the fact that you are doing the work every single day is really, really important. And through that practice, it's almost like explain this. It's like an additional oomph for the thing that you're doing and the impact of the thing that you're doing. So we'll go on to the useful practices now. Okay. Some of these things I use, some of these things I don't use, but there have been times I've dabbled in many of these things. I think all of them, in fact. I'll have to double check when I'm talking. So, as I said, you can find the written blog version over on the blog, and I will put a link on the thing there. So, number 1, ask family and friends for their thoughts and reflections. Remember that this is our own subjective experience, and if you can ask somebody outside of you, or somebody can offer perspective about your own personal experience and how they have witnessed growth or development in you, then it can serve as an additional affirmation to your own internal affirmation of the work that you're doing. So simply just saying to somebody that you know, hey, I've been making these changes in this area of my life. Can you offer me an objective perspective on what it is that you are witnessing? And through that, again, just having somebody else's perspective on an experience is really, really valuable. Number 2 is keep a video diary. I smile because this is my absolute favourite God-given method of reflective practice. Now, anybody that knows me knows that I used to be prolific at just recording things and then sending them off to like family and friends. Now, over the years, many of you have witnessed me sharing information online and through my written work, my video work. But what I also do is I will create videos to share an experience such as a video diary. And I have that since the beginning of my awakening. Hundreds of videos, literally hundreds of videos. Now, this can help if you are going to make a video diary. It can help you to see not only ways in which you speak, ways in which you present yourself, things that you used to say, or even the way that you'd look, the way that you would express your style, for example. And all of these things can serve as an additional reminder, an additional reflective point for, oh my goodness, this time last year, these were the things that I was talking about. These were the things that I was sharing. This was my state of mind. This were the things that I was struggling with. And you can see by simply observation and watching, or just spending even 30 seconds just reflecting on methods of communication, for example, in a video, as to how much progress has been made. And it's a valuable tool, my favourite one. So you can absolutely consider using that as a reflective practice for you. I'm gonna have a drink before I die. The next one is very similar, which is a written diary. Now, I have a written diary as well. I'm a writer. I have a written diary, and I use poetry and creative writing to really create like a point in time written down of an emotional processing. And when I look back, I can pinpoint that written piece to a point in time of when I was experiencing what I was experiencing based off the written piece. I think I've explained that right. So if you don't use a video diary, you don't want to, or just writing things down can be a really valuable tool for just getting things out onto paper. And if you want to, you can refer back to it and use that as a tool to reflect on your experience and ways in which you've grown. Now, the next one is astrological transits and reflect on your thoughts and feelings. Now, as I said, I think in one of my previous blog posts, not too long ago, but I think it was middle of last year when I began to track astrological transits. Still something that I'm trying to integrate into my reflective practice. But if you work with astrology, then you may find that this is really, again, a valuable tool to not only notice the shifts that are happening in the cosmos, but how they affect you on an individual basis. And just sharing things in a diary, video form, however you feel comfortable, sharing the impact that the planetary alignments and the evolution of nature can have on your own individual experience. And in my personal experience, I found that it's brought me closer to attuning to the small shifts and changes, and as a result, it helps me to follow those little shifts and changes and know when something is in alignment or out of alignment, and the steps that I can take to bring it back into alignment. So absolutely use that if you are a type of person who tracks astrology. Now, the next one is look back at photos. Very similar to video diary, but looking back at photos can support in just simply visually seeing growth within yourself. And the next one is reflect on the progress you have made towards your goals. Now, this is important. This is really important, because when you're setting a goal and then you are moving towards the goal, if you are not, once you've reached the goal, if you're not at a point where you can reflect back and see how you've reached the goal and the steps that you've taken to get there, then you may just then go on to create another goal and another goal and another goal. And you're just pottering along when you have opportunities to reflect, witness your growth. Most importantly, celebrate yourself. Celebrate yourself for all that you have achieved, not only for reaching the goal, but what it has taken to get there. And that is the juicy part. Not just the goal, but what it takes to get there. And celebrate the fact that you are doing it and that you continue to do it. And the last one, actually, I've got a really good story for this one. How bizarre that I'm actually sitting in the place as well. Okay, so the last one is think back to a time where something used to be scary and now comes naturally to you. I find it so comical how I'm sitting in exactly the same place. I was going to record over there and I thought, let me just bring everything over here. Just white wall, it's easier, isn't it? 3 years ago, less than 3 years ago, I remember making a video for Instagram, sitting in this exact place. And I remember saying on the video, this is really awkward, isn't it? This is really weird. And for those of you that know me or have seen me for a long time, you know that I can be pretty upfront and pretty nonsensory sometimes with the things that I say. So as I sat here and I was saying, oh, this is really awkward, and I'd posted it, and it was the first video that I'd ever posted publicly for anybody else to see. And it's only just reminded me as I've read that. So if you can think back to a time where something was scary and now it just comes naturally to you, that is probably the most profound ways of reflecting on your growth. I have shivers. I actually feel really emotional because I hadn't realised up until this point. So if you can think about something in your personal experience that felt uneasy or unnerving when you were experiencing it at the time, but now how it's just a natural part of who you are and your experience. Firstly, high five and well done, and continuing to look at those things and reflecting again offers an opportunity of just profound realizations of the growth that you have made in whatever period of time. So there are several questions on here about what questions you can ask yourself when you're reflecting. Now, I'm not going to bring them into this episode today. You can go and check them out on the blog. And these questions on here just serve as an additional point for you to really observe, think about, and write about, talk about how the changes that you have made have impacted your personal life. And again, it's another reflected point for you on your journey. So, I'm really, really glad, firstly, that you've joined me today. Hope that you've taken away a lot of points about what you can use for a reflective practice and different types of reflective practices. But most importantly, the reason for this podcast episode, the reason for this podcast episode is to remember that when you are growing, when you are changing, when you are shifting, that if you are taking micro steps, and even if you're not and you're doing those huge quantum leaps, then remember that it could be all too easy to be so immersed in your experience that you're not necessarily aware of all of the progress that you've made to get you to where you are. So regardless of what kind of shifts and changes and things that you are doing in your life to bring about experiences, different experiences internally and externally, you are still making changes and reflecting on the changes that you are making to not only encourage further growth, but to celebrate yourself for where you've been, where you are, and where you're going. And bringing all of these things together to remember how powerful you are as an individual to be making the changes that you make and continuing to evolve in your own personal way. So I'm going to leave that with you. Have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And if you think that someone else may benefit from this video and that somebody else needs to recognize or would benefit from recognizing the growth that they have made, send this video to them. Share it wherever you need to share it. Allow it to reach more people. And just so blessed to have you here. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall see you next time.